Thank you so much for joining us. It's really an honor to have you with us. Your journey from medicine to space and from the depth of the ocean to the edge of the universe is truly inspiring.
My name is Dave Williams. I'm a Canadian astronaut who flew in space twice. The first time was in 1998 on a 16-day mission dedicated to neuroscience research in space. My second space flight took place in 2007, and I went from being a researcher to helping build the International Space Station, setting the Canadian record for spacewalking. I went outside, did 3 spacewalks, and helped build the space station, this remarkable research platform that we have in orbit. I first dreamt of becoming an explorer many, many years ago. It was in the decade of the 1960s when NASA first started exploring space, and we went from seeing the original Mercury 7 astronauts flying in their small spacecraft through the Gemini program to Apollo, where astronauts landed and walked on the surface of the moon. It was a remarkable era, but that captured my imagination as a young child growing up in Canada, and I started the dream of becoming an astronaut, always wanting to have a chance to fly in space. Astronaut training is like drinking from a fire hose. The biggest challenge is the volume of material that you need to learn in a relatively short time period. I was lucky because as a physician, you have to learn a lot of material in medical school and all the different areas of medical specialties and the knowledge you require to safely treat patients. So learning was something that I had a lot of experience at. So that made it a little bit easier. But certainly when you go to space, the first time you've never really worked in this microgravity environment before. So even though you're learning and training on Earth and you want to do your best when you're in space, it's hard to imagine what it's going to be like until you've really experienced it. So that first flight is always a little bit daunting. And one of the things that I thought was interesting for myself as a former neuroscientist, I was trained in neuroscience in the 1970s that the brain was hardwired, very much like the motherboard of a computer. There's billions of neurons that make up our brain, and that those connections are static and that they allow us to be able to function and do the things that we do. What we found out in Neurolab is that those connections are not static at all. In fact, the brain is remarkably dynamic. We refer to this as neuronal plasticity, and the brain can adapt to the environment that it's in. And we were able to study that and document this remarkable transformation that took place in our nervous systems in space.
What goes through your mind the first time you stepped outside the spacecraft into the vacuum of the space?
It's pretty incredible. If you look at the photograph behind me, I took this photograph on my second spacewalk when I was riding on the end of the Canadarm going down to the payload bay to pick up a gyroscope that we had to replace on the space station. Going outside a spacecraft into the vacuum of space is not a natural thing to do. It's an extreme, harsh environment. If you have a problem out there, you may have the rest of your life to solve the problem. And we recognize the difficulties of working together as a team in such a harsh environment. But it's amazingly beautiful. You know, despite all the challenges and the risks associated with doing a spacewalk, when you're outside looking back at the Earth, you realize that there's no borders separating countries that we can see from space. Quite clearly, we're all in this together on what I might call our global village. And it makes one pause and reflect on what it means to live and work together in our global village, and then what the concept of infinity is all about. You know, you look past the horizon of the Earth out into the black infinite void of space, and it makes you wonder what the meaning is of all of our lives that we have here on the planet. And I realized that when I was in space, the greatest opportunity we all have is to live our legacy on a day-to-day basis and thrive to do our best and work together in collaborative teams to achieve significant goals. I'm very fortunate to be Canada's first dual aquanaut and astronaut. So I've explored both final frontiers, the undersea world and outer space. My first mission to Aquarius was 7 days, and then my second mission was quite a bit longer than that. And anyway, we were looking at how the body adapted to this unique environment, but also how we can do remote medical care in these extreme harsh environments. So we looked at virtual surgery, what we then call telerobotic surgery, to see if some of these techniques that we developed underwater could be one day used on the surface of the moon. So I think one of the challenges that we have in going on these missions beyond Earth orbit is understanding that when we leave the gravitational environment of Earth, humans as biological entities have evolved in a gravitational world. So when we leave that and go to space, we're transitioning into microgravity. And that physiological transition requires essentially the whole body to adapt to living and working in this microgravity environment. But unlike the space station where we orbit the Earth, we're now going to a destination. And in the case of the moon, when we land on the surface of the moon, we now have a gravitational environment. We call it a partial gravity environment because the gravity is a lot less than it is on the surface of the Earth. In fact, on the moon, it's about 1/6 of what it will be on the surface of the Earth. What does that mean for our bone density? What does that mean for our muscle conditioning and our cardiovascular systems? So the Apollo missions demonstrated that humans can live and work for short time periods on the surface of the moon, come back to Earth and not have a problem. But for longer missions on the surface of the moon, we anticipate it'll be similar to Apollo. We won't know until we actually get that experience traveling. So the human body has to adapt from leaving 1G to working in microgravity or 0G to working in partial gravity. And then when it comes back to Earth, you have to go through another microgravity phase and land back on Earth, which if you're coming back from Mars and you have 6 months of microgravity before you land on the surface of the Earth, that's a challenge. So we have to develop systems to maintain the body's conditioning while we're in transit back and forth between our destination. So the second aspect of this is collaboration. And one of the greatest parts of working on the space station is you have people from both genders, different cultural backgrounds who speak different languages, all working together collaboratively in space to understand how humans can live and work and do research in this unique environment. And that's really pretty incredible. You know, I'm very proud to be Canadian. When I'm in space, I represent humanity. I'm a human. So we go forth and we explore as humans together. And that collaboration that we develop on the International Space Station, I think is a tremendous opportunity for all of us terrestrially to see how we can continue to strive to work together and collaborate on Earth with different cultural backgrounds in different countries and borders that are very real here on Earth that we cannot see from space. You know, I think our greatest strength as humans, as a species, is our curiosity and our unique ability to be able to problem solve and come up with innovative solutions to whatever it is. We've had humans permanently on the space station for the last 25 years. We're going to be going back to the moon. We're going to go on to Mars. In the next 500 to 1,000 years, you're going to see humans living on other planets in our solar system, most likely Mars. And if you're a human and you go to Mars, are you a Martian if you're living on the surface of Mars? I think most people would say if you were born on Earth, you're an Earthling and you're a human. But what happens if we have people living on Mars and a child is born on Mars? Are they a Martian? Are they an Earthling? We know they're human. So all these issues are very interesting to think about philosophically right now. They will be addressed over the next 1,000 years as we continue to reach forth and explore space. You know, the thing you miss the most is simple stuff, standing outside in the rain. It sounds totally crazy, but you know, when you're in space, it's easy to understand how you're stuck inside a space station or a spacecraft for a long period of time, 6 months or a year. You miss fresh air, you miss the wind, you miss the sound of the wind and the leaves, and certainly feeling rain on your face. And I remember when we came up from one of our saturation diving missions underwater, and you get to the surface and it was raining, and just taking off your mask and having the rain beating down on your face and being able to taste fresh water was something that was really, really remarkable. And yet for most of us on a day-to-day basis, we don't even think about stuff like that. And I think that's the real opportunity that we all have as individuals is get outside, appreciate the beauty of our planet. Depending upon where you live on the Earth, the planet's a pretty remarkable, beautiful place. So I think the real message that we can all share is the importance of not letting other people define your dreams for you. find a dream that you're passionate about and go off and work to the best of your ability to be able to make that dream come true and turn it into reality. It's not always easy. In fact, it's anything worth doing that I found worth doing is really, really hard to do. It takes a lot of work and sometimes stress and sometimes self-doubt, etc. But working through all of that with resilience enables us to work together collaboratively to do great things. And I think that's a very important message that's worth sharing.